Good morning, Matt.
Good morning, Joe. How's it going?
Good. Where are you finding yourself today?
I am in Grants Pass. I just got back from Jedediah Smith State Park in California over the weekend.
Oh,
Saw a lot
wow.
of cool redwoods. So,
That sounds fun. Nice.
yeah,
Well, welcome back to civilization. So
yes,
that's awesome. I wanted to talk about this tweet from Francois Chollet. He's the person who wrote the Keras library. He had a really interesting tweet uh, yesterday. Let me show you. Um, Yeah, he says, I think it's clear that for many small companies that invested in deep learning, it turned out not to be essential and got cut post-COVID as part of downsizings. There are somewhat fewer people doing deep learning now than half a decade ago for the first time since 2010. And he kind of goes on to talk about, what he calls a deep learning recession. So this is interesting. Here's the data of public job postings on LinkedIn. Yeah. So, an influential person in the deep learning community talking about a deep learning recession. What are your thoughts?
yeah. It's funny. I mean, I think when people saw deep learning when it really started to take off, it was so exciting, right? All this image processing you could suddenly do, and people were like, well, what else can we apply this to? Let's apply it to everything and just see what sticks. And it turned out that a lot of stuff just didn't stick, right? Like, I think you're pretty fond of saying that when you're talking about business data, most of what you need is data engineering and SQL, and then maybe some more advanced data science techniques like clustering. But deep learning just in most cases doesn't seem to get you that much out of business data. And that's where companies were trying to apply this in many cases.
Yeah, I think so. I think there was a lot of hype,
Hmm.
um, and also the notion that it could just apply deep learning because I don't need to do feature engineering. Um, I mean, it's definitely true with unstructured data like images or
Right.
video. But when you get into structured data, I still think that's not doing feature engineering, or at least understanding your data and blindly throwing that into a deep learning algorithm is a recipe for disaster. Um, but yeah, I think his tweet definitely echoes a lot of the stuff that we've seen too, where you get
Hmm.
CTOs, CIOs, devs all enamored with deep learning, and in some cases it's great. Again, there's definitely some use cases, but the number of small companies that I think truly need to do deep learning, or it's not a big population. A lot of companies that think they need to do deep learning, I think, is a much bigger group. So
Yeah. Well, I think we can add too that we see much more fundamental problems that companies need to address before they think about deep learning. In many cases, that's not happening, right? Like they're very basic data quality and data pipeline issues. And instead, they want to spend on the sexy stuff like deep learning. And it's like there's all this low hanging fruit that's not being addressed. And that's where the money should be flowing. And hopefully that will happen during this economic displacement we're going through.
yeah, for sure. I mean, there was another
Yeah.
stat here. Let me show this here. I mean, I think his tweet definitely echoes, what we've been seeing out there anecdotally,
Hmm. Yeah.
where like Indeed even posted, or sorry, it's HackerRank here. But
Right.
yeah, new job postings for data science roles were in July were down 43% compared with last July, which
Mm.
is worse than the overall 21% decline in job postings. So,
Yeah, it's
and
pretty
56%
devastating. So
decline.
it's viewed as a luxury item, basically.
Seems to be.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if data doesn't go by on LinkedIn, I don't see somebody saying, "Oh, I just let go from my data science job and now I'm good for work, so help me out." So, I mean, it
Yeah,
sucks. It sucks. I should be laughing at
it
that,
really
but
does.
it's
Yeah.
just that after a bit, um, yeah, it's rough to see. So
Yeah. And I think I mean, you're a forecaster, right? Like you worked in forecasting for a long time. And this is a time when companies should be investing in forecasting and data fundamentals because that's what's going to save their business. They really need to dig into their data and figure out how the market has changed and how they can make money in the new environment. And the reality is that there's so much uncertainty right now that they're going to need very advanced, powerful forecasting for at least the next year and probably many years after that. And so hopefully we'll see money redirected into those areas. So maybe that would be kind of our advice for data scientists. start looking at data fundamentals and working in those areas. So maybe you should be thinking about forecasting, data quality, data engineering, these kinds of less sexy problems that are the foundation for everything else that's interesting in this field.
Yeah, I do agree. I think there's a certain layer of data science that I'd say is very foundational to almost every company, right? So forecasting is definitely one of them.
Yeah.
You know, and it's sort of the paradox because all forecasting is wrong by definition. But I think at least it sets a trajectory for where your company needs to be planning and allocating its resources. I remember actually getting a job forecasting in the fall of 2008, right? And I think like literally a week or two after I got hired, the financial crisis started. And you want to talk about like forecasting bloodbath. That was, I think, a really good experience in the sense where, yeah, your data may or may not be applicable anymore, but what it forced you to do is really understand your customers as well. And we had to keep forecasting.
Yes.
And I would say, you know, arguably for that company, forecasting is what kept that company alive during that time because we were at least able to set a course for the chief financial officer and the finance department and the investors in terms of here's how we're going to allocate you know, our capital in order to you know, to optimize margin and profit at the end of the day. And I think situations like that really, you know, show if you are a good forecaster or not, or just in general know your business or not. In that case, we survived. But I would say another, you know, component of an, you know, data science foundation is understanding customer behavior. That's things like customer retention, customer churn. So if you aren't doing those things as well at a company, then you know, and you focus on deep learning instead, I would kind of wonder what it is that you're working on, because you don't need deep learning to do those types of you know, analysis or models. So
Yeah. Well, it's funny because it feels like we're going back in time a bit, right? We used to call this field data mining before the term data science was invented. And data mining was more of a descriptive discipline. It was about understanding stuff that was kind of hidden in the data, where you really had to work with these large data sets and pull out insights that weren't immediately visible with really simple SQL. And I feel like that's where the investment should probably be right now. Like, it's not really prescriptive data science for give me some crazy algorithm, just understanding who my customers are in a dramatic shift in the economy. And then you can start planning for how to reach those customers better and how to scale up better with that group of customers and how to expand your customer base.
Yeah, all this stuff's incredibly important. So, and you know, maybe this is a good thing for data science, because I think for the longest time we noticed, you and I had noticed that companies were investing, you know, in data science teams, and sometimes maybe without a clear problem to solve,
right?
You know, but also with this desire to, you know, do deep learning out of the gate. And I don't know about you, but I was definitely looking at it like, well, I mean, are you doing these because you have a really good use case, or is this just so you can maybe go tell all your friends that you're doing deep learning and like look really cool? Because honestly, that motivates some people. So.
Oh no, it motivates probably the majority of people that we've worked with over the years, including us from time to time. It's like, oh, let's try out Keras or whatever exciting library is the hot new thing, when really you just need to be focused on doing your job better. Obviously, it's really important to stay current, but I think what we saw a lot was data scientists were just wandering off into these obscure technologies that really were of almost no use in the work they were doing, just kind of preparing for the next job that they wanted to have that was research adjacent. And you know, companies, they need R&D, but they need a lot of that development focus, not just research. They need to actually get insights from their data right now and develop processes to do that.
Yeah, for sure. It's just the age-old resume-driven development, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
it's yeah, it's everywhere. Yeah, we had a listener question too about, and I'll just read it out to you. So this listener asks, I am very new to the data field and IT generally, and I want to pursue my career in data science. I want to know how I should start and what skills I should acquire.
Yeah, and I think there are two parts to this, right? There's the skills that you should acquire, And then there's the problem of getting yourself noticed and getting your foot in the door in the career. We kind of talked about this a bit earlier. So yeah, what was your take on this?
So I would say that if you are coming from a non-technical, non-math background, non-engineering background, my take is invest your time learning the fundamentals.
Yeah.
Like you got to learn. There's a certain progression, in my opinion, for a data scientist. The bottom of this, the base of this progression is knowing math. So I would say
Yes.
being I wouldn't say awesome, but at least competent in things like basic calculus, know what a derivative is, for example. Stats, that's one thing that you're going to use a lot in data. I would say become really good at stats if you can help it. If not, at least have a basic understanding of statistics. Probability is another area, and then linear algebra. But again, I tend to be more of a first principles person, and I know that there are data scientists and practitioners out there who would disagree with my thinking on this, because I think once you have a good math foundation, it makes everything else a lot easier. Because again, all of data science really comes back to first principles when you're talking about at least the mechanical area of data science, which is crunching
Right.
numbers. Like a lot of these techniques haven't changed, in decades or hundreds of years. And so I would say there's a lot of good material to go learn these things. And once you have, I think, a good foundation there, then it makes sense to maybe learn how to program, for example, and apply it to machine learning. Learning programming on its own, I think, is a horrible waste of time because it doesn't teach you anything unless you're trying to like solve a problem. I mean, it's like learning Spanish, but never going out and like talking to people in
Actually
Spanish. It
speaking.
doesn't do you
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
good.
Okay.
So, but yeah, I would say get the base math understanding and then learn to program, because at least you'll have something to apply it to. Again, my advice, I think, is more also my path. And so, I've seen people try different approaches, and I just haven't seen it really work out that well. There's a caveat though that nowadays in machine learning, it's really easy to do machine learning. I mean, you could just spin up data robot and actually do machine learning, but
Yeah.
but that's more of a citizen data scientist and not really a data
Yeah.
scientist. If you want to be a data scientist, here's the deal: it's going to be a lot of work. I don't know
Yeah.
how else to say it. So
Oh,
you got to put in the
absolutely.
effort.
It's a grind, right? Like anything. You want to do the exciting, sexy stuff, but like you have to build all those foundations. It's like, you have to do your hundreds of push-ups to gain that level of fitness, basically.
Yeah.
My immediate reaction to this question more had to do with getting noticed and getting your foot in the door, not the skill side that you were talking about.
Yeah.
And to me, this is kind of a concern. What I've seen, I think in software, we've developed, so software engineering, companies have developed processes for entry-level people. So in other words, you go to a good CS program and then they'll hire you as a junior software developer. And then they have a ladder of, Google has like 11 different levels of engineer. You start at the bottom and you work your way up through that process. In data science, it doesn't seem like that really exists to the same degree. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think typically to get into a real data science job, you have to come in with some credibility already. And so there's a huge chicken and egg problem here. And in that respect, there are a couple of ways to get your foot in the door. So if you have like a master's degree in a technical area, that will help you to have enough credibility. You get that initial job and learn on the job, hopefully from there. If you don't have that, if you're just coming in from like a code academy background in data science, I feel like you might be better off maybe starting out in data engineering. Data engineering, I think, is becoming more and more important and more recognized, but it just doesn't have the cachet, the sexiness that data science does. I think people will probably hire you if you had really strong SQL skills, really strong cloud skills, Python skills, and you can get started that way, develop really nice data engineering skills, but then while you're in the job, find opportunities to apply those to data science. And then your next job or your next role inside that same company could have something to do with data science.
I agree, and it also happens at a time as Francois' tweet indicated.
Yeah.
There may be a sea change going on with data science itself. I don't think it's
Yeah.
just restricted to deep learning. What I think we're seeing is maybe a recalibration of expectations for data science. And
Right.
my hope is that the term data science kind of just goes away, actually. I know it's a bit controversial to say that, but it's gotten to the point where data science, whereas I think it used to mean something, um, it now is so ambiguous
Yeah.
um, and multifaceted that I'm not sure if you're going to go hire a data scientist, like what are you hiring for? What does that job description look like? I think what you're going to start seeing is more fine-tuned or fine-grained job descriptions. So things like data analyst, that will actually not be a bad phrase anymore. People,
Yeah.
won't vomit in their mouths when they hear data science or data analyst. I think it's awesome. Analytics is great, and we're seeing a resurgence in that, as you say, kind of back to the future. There'll be maybe machine learning engineers, data
Yeah.
engineers, and then I would say that the real data science piece, is more just going to turn into algorithm researchers and that sort of a thing. I could see more meaningful titles being applied to each of these roles. Data science supposedly encompasses all these things, which, as you know, I'm fond of saying, when you're everything, you're also nothing.
Right.
So
And we've seen this again and again, right? Like actually people's skill sets, even working data scientists, are very, very narrow. And it's time to start defining more roles so that data scientists and data analysts and engineers can be more productive.
mhm. Yeah, completely. And so, yeah, to answer this person's question, I think, yeah, you're right. It's how do you get visibility? This is, I would say, especially in a crowded field like data science, it might be better to zig while others zag, as the saying
Hmm.
goes. I mean, if you're just trying to be the millionth first person who can do random forest and deep learning and XGBoost, I mean,
Right.
now you're competing with all the other people who have exactly the same skill set. Whereas I think if you can
Yep.
more start applying yourself to either a domain that you happen to know really, really well and start applying these techniques to that domain, or just find a kind of a peripheral career path and then maybe get into the whatever data science happens to be at that time in the future. I think that's a pretty sensible approach. To go head on, as a lot of people do, I would say nowadays, especially given the challenging job market, is it's just going to be a lot harder for you.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, if I'm a team leader or product manager in the current environment, I'm going to go hire one of the really experienced people who's been doing this for 5 years, who got laid off
Exactly.
in this mini recession we're going through. But I think there are probably still opportunities in data engineering, especially if you get some skills that are really in demand right now. I think we're seeing a lot of growth in the cloud. Cloud was already growing, but companies are reevaluating a lot of their infrastructure costs. And so if you get really good at various cloud technologies, combine that with skills in data, get your foot in the door in data engineering that's cloud oriented, and then develop a career from there into data science or machine learning engineering. I think that's the way to go right now, probably.
Yeah, and it's also coupled with, if you want to do data science, specifically machine learning, you got to have an interesting problem to solve that's applicable
Yeah.
to a domain, because a lot of I would say at least the core machine learning is becoming automated through AutoML. So
Yeah.
I would say that, you'd want to use AutoML for non-core tasks and really apply yourself to customizing algorithms where it's core to your business or your endeavor. But anything
Yeah.
outside of that, like, yeah, just use AutoML and automate it. I don't know why you want to reinvent the wheel every single task that you need to do. Like, really focus
Yeah.
your time on the things that are special to you. And there's
Yeah.
absolutely a use
And
case
then,
for deep learning and stuff like that when it's applicable to to, I guess, your secret sauce at a
yep.
company.
But again, in the current environment, there are a lot of really skilled machine learning
Lots.
engineers, deep learning engineers who are available. And so maybe focus on getting really good at the orchestration and the pipelines and the automation, like you're saying. And then kind of as a hobby, build up these other skills and find ways to be useful to your employer and say, hey, I can do this as well. And then hopefully you develop those skills in deep learning that you want to take into a future job if that's what you'd like to do.
Hmm. Yeah, for sure. I think that's really good advice. And also to people getting started in the field, just know that things always change.
Yeah.
And that's again why I always hit on, if you're gonna at least for technical skills, focus on the fundamentals first. There are so many
Yeah.
trends that come and go, but if you peek under the hood of any of these trends, there's always some element of the fundamentals there. I don't care what it is, whether you're talking about computer science, whether you're talking about data science, analytics, and in data, again, the foundations are things like statistics, SQL, probably Excel even, like that's not going anywhere. Focus on the things that aren't going anywhere and get really good at those, and, tack on, I would say new skills as it comes. And again, to your point, figure out a path that's maybe different from other people and get some visibility there. So,
yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the point is that data science is only going to grow, right? Even though the name will probably change. I think this is going to turn out to be really fundamental to businesses and the economy and every area of research and engineering in the future. But right now we're kind of coming out of this hype cycle, and this area still needs to mature into a real profession. And that's, yeah, there are going to be some changes. I guess that's my point. The skill set that you'll need will really get clarified. The more clear educational tracks for the field will emerge in the future. And so for the time being, try to ride those changes and find a way to get into the field and develop the career you want.
Totally agree. And I like that point you just said too, where, data science will mature into a real profession. I think that's a good and profound statement. It is still immature. I mean, think about it. The term was coined back in the late 2000s. It was intentionally left vague, actually. When it was DJ Patil and Jeff Hammerbacher, or whatever his name is, when they came up with the term, they didn't really define what it was. I think when they came up with it, it was more sort of an amalgamation of what they felt they were doing at I think it was LinkedIn or something. But yeah, they didn't really say, oh well, it's this, and this, and this, right? So it was intentionally amorphous, and it'll continue to evolve just like all things do in this field. So yeah, and
When
like
you've seen it
it's
evolve,
still
right?
young. Yeah, I've seen it
Yeah,
evolve.
and you got
I
into
was doing
this
data science before it was
before
called data
data
science.
science. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so,
yeah.
I think the point is that it's still in flux. It's not like it's really matured that much. Like we know exactly what data science is now, or what the roles are, or what the next 10 years are going to look like. I
Well,
think it's
okay,
going to
so and back
stabilize,
to
but
the
it's going to take some time.
It will take some
Yeah.
time. And back to that tweet, when I look back on my experiences in data early on, the things that made or broke a project, sure, your technical skills I think are given, right? Like you should have technical skills and math skills and nunchuck skills and all that stuff. But what really sets you apart is your ability to work with stakeholders and the business.
Right.
And I would say this is also maybe the third leg of the conversation is, because as I look back, those problems have never gone away. And in fact, I would say as data science became more popular, they got, I would say, more challenging, because businesses have these expectations on these hyper smart data people that they should just somehow magically do magic stuff. And when they find out they can't, then it's like, well, then how is this any different from what we've been doing all these years before? And so, but and it comes back to learning how to set expectations, learning how to hit deadlines. Like if you can do those things, then maybe this deep learning recession we're in may turn itself around. So I think the only way that recession is going to turn itself around is when people have reset expectations on deep learning, and where it's used and what they can expect from it. I think there's maybe I hate to call it a bait and switch, but I'll call it that anyway. I think there's a big bait and switch with recently, with things like deep learning and how you could transform your business with it. At the end of the day, the transformation is not about the algorithm. It's about the organizational discipline to transform itself both digitally and with data. And that discipline has always been the crux of any project, throughout IT. So.
Yeah, and I think what happened with deep learning is that it was so amazing when these big advances in image processing came out. It just looked like magic. And so when people see magic, they assume that you can apply that magic to anything. There must be an incantation for every possible thing that you'd want to do in the business world. And it turned out that that magic was pretty domain specific. And I think those domains will expand in the future. But for now, focus on your fundamentals, focus on your data pipelines and orchestration, and the team management, communication, and setting expectations on all of these things that make a business successful.
Totally. Well, I think that's a good place to wrap up. So hope you have a good Monday, and yeah, we'll talk to you soon, Matt. So
Sounds good. Take care.
okay, all right.